today we have Julius, who is one of the very well known engineering leaders in Singapore and someone who is very close to the communities, especially developer communities who have been contributing for a very long time. I've known Julius for a couple of years now because he is someone who is very good at helping his colleagues grow while he's also growing himself. Julius, welcome to the show.
Thank you for the very kind words. I'm pretty sure that everyone has been part of this journey with me, and without you, without all these friends, colleagues, people that I kind of journeyed together, like I wouldn't be where I am. So in the end, it's really about the people that we journey with that is important.
Julius, you have started off from the very first layers of technology and then move up in the ladder as well past 2 decades. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how it's been in your career journey?
Yeah, sure. I think it was quite interesting because my career wasn't as with most people, all the ups, all the glorious companies, all the, my career actually was up and down, I guess. Half of my career are in big companies, the other half are in startups. So I kind of see the full spectrum, I suppose. I've been in startups that didn't do so well. I've been in startups that actually succeeded and became one of the global brands that many people around the world know about. I started off as a software engineer in the airlines industry. So we do all these revenue optimization. So when you book a seat, right, in a flight, we actually optimize those individual seats. So we have a rough sense of when you should book your seats. Like where should you book your seats? Because we kind of optimize those kind of information. We use millions and millions of historical data to predict the best possible pricing. And the interesting thing is, I didn't like that work because it wasn't in the front lines. Like when you talk about airline systems, you want to be at the forefront. The booking system, for example, you see people, kind of look for the best seats and so forth. But for me, I'm at the back end, right? But now, think about data science, think about data engineering, AI. That's where revenue optimization comes in, optimization comes in. So now, looking back, I felt that that was a very important piece of my journey that I didn't appreciate back then. I moved to telecommunications back when WhatsApp, in today's parlance, Telegram, Viber, all these chat and call apps, right? Before they were famous, we work with technologies that allows you to do internet calls. So I used a couple of protocols that I think most people these days we don't really know about now, like XMPP. We use CSIP, we use ICE, this kind of protocol that it's still there. People still use it, but we don't really talk about it that much now. Afterwards, I moved to Singtel for a year. And then afterwards, I moved to Rakuten, which is the Japanese Amazon. Within Rakuten, I work in Viki, which is a video streaming company. So we kind of work with Android, iOS, Google Home, Chromecast, Android TV, Apple TV, Amazon TV. There's Roku for those who know about it in the UK and in the US. Samsung LG, of course. We Today, I think we have about billions of minutes viewed per month, which is quite substantial. And we have millions and millions of subscribers around the world. Afterwards, I moved to construction, and then to education. I moved to transportation, and now I'm in the environment division of the government in Singapore. So we deal with things like weather data, things like waste management data, hazardous materials, airborne diseases. Hawker Center is under NEA, where I work. So we deal with all these kind of services for the government. So I kind of lead the software engineering efforts on each of these divisions.
If you want to share about your educational background, how you started off as well, did you start from technology? How was your background in that sense?
Yeah, that was very interesting because when I chose computer science, right, as my degree, it was in a way by accident. As with most people in middle school, many of us don't really know what we want in life. Probably today people know more. So what happened to me was I was following the trend back then, you know, like as a, um, I guess as a Chinese kind of influence. You want your son to be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer, right? None of them are attractive to me. So what happened was back in those days, this was probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was this very popular chat app called MIRC. So people with hair color like myself, which is turning purely white soon, it's a very popular app. It's like Slack for today. So people go in, they hang out. Different schools have their own channels. So you go in, you have your own uh, uh, cliques inside. You have fights that high school students, middle school students, kind of engage in all the time. So I learned to come up with scripts. So you can come up with scripts to create a trivia bot, for example. You can create script to have all these nice animations, nice decorations whenever you uh, put up your chat and stuff. So I found it quite fun. And then I felt that that could be something that I could explore in my university years. And it's because of those hobbies that I felt that I could potentially enjoy computer science, which I did. So that was a journey.
When you take in Singapore, Julius as a name is also known by a lot of community as well. So the first time that I met you also was as a part of a community program that I was a part of in my previous company. So how did you get started with community? Why did you feel that you want to be a part of a community?
Yeah, I think this was back in the days where Google products were all the rage. There's all sorts of things that we really enjoyed back then, and still do today, right? Like things like Firebase was new, Kotlin was new, Jetpack Compose didn't exist yet. We cloud platforms such as Google Cloud, AWS, they're very, very new back then. Um, my team, when we were working at Viki, which is the video streaming company by Rakuten, we benefited a lot from communities. We go to all these talks where different representatives from different companies would come in and talk about how they solve their problems. Folks from Google will talk about the new products that they are introducing, the new frameworks, the new ways of working, the new context. So we felt that um, as a good citizen in a way in the developer community, it would be nice to give back, because in the end, what you want to do is to have this virtuous cycle, a virtuous loop, for everyone to contribute what they know. It's open sourcing knowledge in a way, right? And I think because Shefras, you were at Google at that time, and we felt that it could be an interesting opportunity for us to potentially partner together. We can share experiences, and you can give us a certain platform, I guess, for us to, kind of share these kind of experiences and potentially benefit a larger community. And obviously we are a beneficiary, so I think we felt during that time that that could be a win-win-win for all parties, and hence we felt that that could be a interesting opportunity for us to explore.
So I think back then at Rakuten Wiki, you were leading some of the Android related developments, and then where you are and Saurabh, bunch of folks were working with you as well during that time. So it's pretty interesting how where they are also, like who were like your sort of direct reportees, and then they're working in different companies, which is pretty amazing. So Julius, while that like all of those were happening with the community, something that I really liked about what you did was around like focusing not only technology, yes, that's fundamental for engineers to become successful. At the same time, you started actually talking about stuff that are not being spoken. Like for an example, you brought up this really interesting talk. I'll leave a video link as well, where you gave a talk about scientific leadership, and then you started talking about how to look at engineering from different angles. What led you to give that sort of take that initiative around like scientific leadership? What really helped? etc. That would be fantastic. And at the same time, how do you see the scientific leadership has evolved now with the advent of AI?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. And thank you so much for the plug. I think that whenever we do things as an engineer, as people from DevRel, sales, all of these verticals that we work in, there's always a need for data-driven decision making, or at least many people might say data informed. And so, in the same way, when we lead a team, when we manage a team, being data driven is also very important, right? And therefore, when we come up with certain decisions, when we come up with certain ways of working, many of these has to be backed by actual data that it's supposed to be well researched as much as possible, and therefore, I feel that many of these theories should apply. So, for example, things like the theory of happiness, for example, how happy people, um, in general, they would take more risk. But also, we have to cater for the tolerance, right? Taking more risk doesn't has certain implications. So, for example, when people get too risky with what they do, there are certain checks and balances that has to be in place, certain risk management, which may or may not exist depending on how big your company is at that point, how much risk can you take at that point. There's something quite interesting in that there was a study whereby people in general take more risk if they are with friends than when they are alone. So let's say, for example, when you put two people together and you are more likely to drive above the speed limit if you are with somebody else. So with that as a context, right, there are so many things that could be applied to leadership, to teamwork, for example. When you need to actually push the boundaries, it's often better to put people together in a team, because then they are more likely to push the boundaries than them being alone. It's very true for software engineering, right? Like if you think about software engineers, for example, it's easier for you to do your work if you have somebody else to bounce ideas with, because you have validation that what you're working on is likely going to be good because there's somebody else to check with. And then with the advent of AI, right? The thing is, now it becomes a little bit more easier if you think about it. Because with AI, I don't always need the human to bounce ideas with. I can bounce it with the AI, right? So one very good example that I recently had was I wasn't sure of certain decisions that I need to make. I don't know what are the risks involved, but in the government there are all sorts of things that you have to take into consideration, which in small companies or in private you don't have to, right? The good thing in Singapore government is we have our own chatbot, our own chat GPT. As many of the viewers in Singapore might know, it's called Pair. It's Pair Chat, pair.gov.sg. And so we can work with Pair to ask about all sorts of government requirements, security requirements, data classification, and with all of these nuances that Pair can provide us, it makes it very easy for me now to be much more productive. I don't have to go through the grapevine and ask the right people about certain information about a certain way to interpret many of our documents. I can just ask the bot, and it will generally give me context, ideas, suggestions on how to work within the boundaries of the guidelines.
So it actually was very interesting to see you and where you started like a podcast series, a video cast series, where you were interviewing a lot of engineering leaders during pandemic time and right after that also. It was called, I think, the Big O development.
So, yes, Big O development. That's right.
You brought in some of the big names that was a part of the industry to come and be featured in the podcast series. A lot of good learnings. I remember there was one engineering leader from LinkedIn came
Mm.
and joined as well. So very interesting. I learned a lot. One of the podcasts is that I really liked. I think if you have time, you should bring it back.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. There's an interesting backstory there in that we are all in a journey. including myself, even today, I'm still in a journey of needing to learn stuff, needing to be more proficient on certain things. I still face a lot of challenges at work in life that I don't know how to deal with, even to this day. And so during that time, I find that it's a very good opportunity to learn from people who are ahead of me. And because it's during the pandemic, it's a good way for me to reach out to them. And again, like when we think about how we want to get things done, how we kind of want to accomplish things, it's always important to think about win-win. Um, what would benefit me? What would benefit them? What would benefit the viewers? Are things that are tied to information that are not readily available in the internet at that time. And because it's the pandemic, it's very easy to invite people in to share their thoughts. We don't have to fly people in. The cost is very, very low. And from there, I can ask questions that I myself am having, and I can, to the point of this podcast, kind of pre-send all the questions that I may have so that people can have time to digest, time to research, perhaps talk about things that they are also interested with. It's called Big O because in software engineering or in computer science, there's this thing called the Big O, which is a way to identify how complex your algorithm is. So the bigger the O is, the more complex it is. And so in general, we kind of want to optimize for the smaller O when we write our algorithm so that it's faster and so forth. And that's pretty much how the name came up.
This brings up to one of the key sort of element that you were touch basing on, Julius. So I've since the days that I've started this video series, so the viewers would range from 24 to about 44. So this actually captures from juniors to mid level to even like senior ICs as well, who are trying to sort of understand with what's happening in the new AI era. There's a sense of urgency in the air. Like a lot of people tend to think, like, is it really necessary? Are we really in a sort of an AI bubble? It's at the moment there are mixed feelings. Some folks, they are very strong on saying yes, we need to move ahead with AI. It's from boardrooms to water cooler discussions. It's always about AI. You would see every single day there's something new that's coming up. So there's a bit of, one thing is certain to some people and uncertain to a lot of other folks. As someone who's in the leadership, and who have been in the leadership as CTO, as VP of engineering, Julius, is this a real urgency? Is AI a real urgency for a lot of these companies and then for individuals as well?
That's a very deep question. I hope I can um, add information to a sea of information already available. Um, I think there's two ways to look at it. One is there's urgency in certain contexts, and another way to look at it is there are opportunities in most other contexts. I think we have to be very clear about what AI is good at and what they're not good at. AI in general, it's good at approximation type problem. When you search for something, AI is really good at that. Things that you don't need 100% accuracy, AI is good at it. So, for example, things like marketing, things like communication, or product recommendations, AI is very good at it. But it may not be very good at transactions, right? Things like, let's say, for example, banking, right? Or things, for example, things like quality assurance, for example, service fulfillment. It may not be uh, as we might not feel that it's right to have AI treat our diseases. For example, we still probably want to have some doctors, right, to look at it. Um, so in light of urgency, there are certain constraints by which AI adoption is really urgent. So, for example, if you are the key players, you're a platform player or ecosystem player, big tech, for example, you need to be at the bleeding edge because it's a land grab. For most tech companies, it's a land grab. People go to the company that provides the best service, which is why search is dominated by Google, for example. Operating systems is dominated by Microsoft, for example. because it's a land grab. That's just how tech works, right? But on the other hand, the opportunities are much greater if you think about it, because AI, as with any of these inflection points in history, um, there's always that inflection point of a productivity revolution. Think about the steam engine, for example, right? Industry 1.0, and think about automation, for example. In the age of computers, for example, there's those inflection points of productivity such that if a country, a nation, a company fails to adopt, they become obsolete because other companies, other organizations became much more efficient in doing what they're doing. And AI is showing that kind of visibility, that kind of potential. And therefore, there's a lot of opportunities at play that we can look at. Um, Urgency, depending on context. Opportunity, there's a lot of opportunity, but I think what is not left for debate is that it is very, very vital, especially people in the knowledge industry, to look for opportunities to use AI, because that would be a key differentiating factor between you and your organization over others that are not adopting it as much.
Would we be replaced by AI, or do we still have hope?
I think the sorrowful answer is yes. In the we can see from past experience that there are certain jobs that has been completely automated away by technologies, right? But the good thing is that some new jobs came about because of new opportunities, new platforms. For example, the UI UX designers, they don't exist before, 10, 20 years before. There's very, very few, they don't even exist. But now there's a lot of UI UX designers. Software engineers, for example, think about 50 years in the past, there's very, very few of us. But now, that's um, we are all here, Deborah. So there will always be new jobs that gets created as time comes by. The economy will always be there. The market forces will always be there. And so yes, there are certain jobs that will eventually get automated, but we always have to be mindful of um, opportunities that becomes available afterwards. And that's just the way the world works. If we are unable to adopt, we, in a way, it's deserving for us to be where we are. So I think it's very important for us to explore what opportunities are available, and kind of continue to have this kind of conversations.
That's true. So I still remember there was a debate when term called software engineer. The engineers were a little bit bitter about it. Why do you call them software engineers? And then now software engineers get bitter when someone is called a prompt engineer. So I think the cycle goes on. It's very true when you said the jobs that did not exist, they exist now, and then we can expect the same thing moving forward as well. And I think it's already in the advent of like people trying out with playing around with the tools. We don't know how things going to evolve as well. But the challenge is compared to 50 years ago, now people are much more connected. We talk a lot, so the fear sort of spreads across like very easily, as well, uncertainty, etc. Sort of, if you look at it, we are in a hive mind at the moment. Collective mindset is being shared. So
I think you make a very good point, right, Chef? And if one were to compare our lives today as compared to, let's say, our parents' generation or grandparents, just think about the concerns that they have. Things like famine, war, lack of food, diseases. The things that we struggle with today are much more benign, much, much more benign. So if they're able to tread through their lives, kind of weather the storm, I'm pretty sure we are quite resilient and we can figure things out as well.
that's true. Life finds a way, right?
Finds a way for sure.
And very thanks, Julius, for sharing that perspective. As an engineering leader, you'd know what's happening in the boardroom, and even at the working with the senior leadership currently as well. And I've known you host a very sort of a close group of like meet a close group of CTOs, CIOs. on a sort of a regular basis. All of you discuss about these things as well. I've been to one of those very interesting how these CTOs talk about like how um, like from people management to talking about like some of the organizational challenges, etc. So let's if we change the gears a little bit, Julius, you were an IC when you started off, an individual contributor, and then you moved to become a manager. It like I've seen people, they think, oh, when you're a manager your life is easy, but the life is actually very different, that part of that side of the table. Right. So I think it's very important for folks to sort of understand who are currently individual contributors, or maybe someone who's working with a manager, to understand that mindset, like what does my engineering manager, what does my director engineering is going through at the moment, right? Like, since you have been that side of the table, how does that side of the table look like, Julius?
Wow, that's a tough one. I would think that the challenges are different. I wouldn't say that it's easier or harder. It's just different. So maybe I can articulate as an IC what are the easy parts of being an IC, what are the hard parts, and what the flip side might look like. So as an IC, the easy part is that you have a very well defined scope. You know exactly what you have to do because it's in your JR ticket. You know, if it's not there, you're gonna push somebody to put it there. You know, like it's very very well defined, and because it's very well defined, you know exactly the steps to get it done. If you don't know the steps, there's ChatGPT or Amazon Nova, for example, that you can ask, and you know there it comes. Um, but in being an IC as well, there are life responsibilities that will catch up over time. When you're young, you have very little responsibilities in life, and therefore there's a lot of opportunities for you to focus on new things because young engineers are generally very, very curious. And so they explore, they try new things, they discover new things, which is why you have people like Zuckerberg, you have people like Sergey and Larry, you know, they are able to invent all these amazing companies. It was during the time in life where this is at all possible. Sure, the more successful startup entrepreneurs, they start at age 40 and above, but those radical, uh, how shall I say, world defining, you know, kind of momentary, like world changing companies, they always start at around that age, 20 to 30 years old. And so, as a young engineer, you have that opportunity. But then, as you grow older, responsibilities pile up. You have younger engineers now that could discover new things as compared to you, and it's getting more and more difficult to catch up because you have your wife to take care of, you have kids to take care of, you have bills to take care of, you have aging parents to take care of. There's more and more things that will catch up, and as they come, they become more and more sophisticated. It doesn't get easier. Life responsibility just gets harder over time. And so the flip side in engineering management, because all these life experiences requires you to manage them, um, and therefore you start to learn the techniques, the human side of things, you know, how you communicate things to people, how do you look after the interests of your wife, your kids, your stakeholders, you know, your direct reports, how do you figure out how to make all of them happy, look after their interests, and kind of find out what would be the best possible configuration such that as many people as possible could win. And so that's the life of being a manager. What becomes easy as a manager is that you don't have to go very, very deep into certain technical aspects, right? And so therefore, younger engineers, they it will take time for them to catch up on the management side of things because you know the needs are different now. But then the more challenging part in being a manager is that people are not incentivized to give you bad feedback, which is actually quite important. You know, people are incentivized to appease you because you have power over people, right? And so if you want to improve, you now have to start reading signs, right? Like you don't have to. It's very important to distinguish between what people say and what people do. So you have to look at what people do and what not what they say, because what people do, how they behave, those are the feedback to you. Those are the things that you have to read because that's what they're telling about you. Um, and so I think it's very very different. But there's always that journey there. Some people, they just really don't want to deal with people. Feel free to stay as an IC. There's amazing, amazing life opportunities available as you stay as an IC. But also for those that are like me who feels that the challenges and the nuances of being a manager is far more interesting and perhaps far more scalable in life, there's always that room as well.
Don't focus on what people say, but look at what people do. So something that we generally sort of miss out on, we only think about, okay, this manager or this particular leader told me to do X, Y, and Z. You actually forget to sort of read between the lines, the details that are not being spoken in words. So that comes up from the doing part, and essentially. So I think that's an important one the folks still need to sort of focus on if they want to climb up their career ladder, understand the real expectations. Because now, see, depending on the culture that you come from, depending on the manager's background, some folks are very openly will give you feedback. Some folks they don't, but they are not able. It's a cultural thing as well. I think an important thing to keep an eye on as well. So Julius, like about reading between the lines, right? Like, how can someone really understand what management really wants?
I don't know whether I have fully mastered it. I highly doubt. So perhaps what I can do is to add to the conversation and we can see what potential wisdom people might pick up. But again, this is me still in the journey of trying to read people, and so I might have made a lot of mistakes in the past, and I'm pretty sure I can and will continue to make mistakes. Um, so I think some of the ways for us to read people, right, to kind of read between the lines, are closely tied to the basic human needs, basic human instincts. For example, all of us are selfish. Um, you are selfish. I am selfish. If we can double our salary, 10x our salary, why not? For the same amount of work, why not? We are all selfish. Do we want recognition? Of course, we want recognition. Do we want things like power, for example, things like freedom, for example, to do whatever we want? Of course, we want those kind of things, right? But we also have our fears, right? We are afraid of a lot of things, people who are much better than us, trying to compete for limited resources, for example, for us to get found out, right? There's all sorts of imposter syndrome, all sorts of fear that our direct reports are actually better than us. There's all sorts of things that plays as a factor as a result of us coming out with all sorts of decisions that we make day to day. Some of them are very instinctive, very bestial. Some of them are very well thought through. And it's always a gradient, right? Some people are better than others in terms of kind of parsing this out, kind of inhibiting certain instincts. But it is what it is. And so, therefore, when we engage with people, right? When we read people, I think it's fairly important for us to again keep in mind there are certain scientific ways of dealing with things that reduces some of these instincts, some of these I guess kind of bestial, kind of visceral reactions. So I'll give an example. In general, when people feel happy, they're more likely to take risk, and so as a result, when you are more likely to take risk, your defenses go down. Things as simple as smiling, for example, things as simple as speaking a little bit more slowly, a little bit more nicely to people. You can, in bringing the defenses down, it gives them that permission to be more upfront with you, and in reading those moments of those packets of opportunity where people will actually say things, that would be one way for me to pull data out, right? Because otherwise, the actions are the best you can look at. Another way, of course, is to make friends with the people around you, right? Build good relationships, because people in general, they have good intentions to people they care about, right? Their friends, and so if there's a negative feedback that comes in about Shafras to me, I'd be more than happy to sit down with Shafras and say, hey, there's this thing that I've been hearing. Is there an opportunity for us to potentially work together, for me to kind of hear from your angle, and see how we can improve conversations, right? There's that kind of things as well. Um, so I think that there's all sorts of strategy to read between the lines. There's all sorts of strategy for you to suss things out. Um, but it's always an abstraction, like in the same way that when you negotiate for your salary, you don't know whether you can get that extra $100, extra $1,000. There's always a nagging feeling that you under negotiated, right? It's the same thing, like it's always a feeling. We cannot fully guarantee. Some people are much better than others in kind of identifying these nuances, but at the end of the day, we are working with very limited data. There's no foolproof assurance that what you're reading is what the way the world is. But um, I think if we work within the principles of us being selfish, us having egos, and always being on the lookout of what's the win-win for all, it makes it so much easier for us to read between the lines and act on the best interests of as many people as possible.
Something that I personally also do is that I try to be nice, because I've seen people sometimes can be very rude. And then generally, when you are nicer, people tend to kind of perceive you well, and then they tend to sort of open up as well, when they feel very confident, when they let down those guards, they're very open with you. That's something that I personally do as well, because at the end of the day, you don't want a lot of enemies the day that you die, right? You would want to have at least a few people around you on the day of your deathbed. So it's an interesting point that you made, Julius. So shifting gears a little bit more as well, Julius. Now there's sort of a notion going around with whatever that's happening in the industry. There's no jobs for juniors. So this comes up when I have conversations with company folks, when I have conversations with like students, when I have conversations in the community. This comes up pretty frequently. Has AI sort of replaced the job scope of a junior developer? Is that real? Is it happening? If so, how can the folks who are starting off can get started? Any tips around that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the unfortunate answer is yes, they are being replaced by AI. I think let's just call a spade, right? Many a time we feel that we need somebody with experience to prompt the AI to figure out where the AI is getting things wrong, and therefore the trust that management have on senior engineers as compared to junior is much higher, right? Because I mean, AI tokens are cheaper than humans. They don't fight back. They're super, super helpful. You can get them to work 24/7. So there's that disadvantage for juniors right now. But I think in light of that, however, there are certain things that they can actually capitalize on. So let me give you a few examples. Um, in general, companies are looking after their profits, right? Their revenue, because every company has a P&L, profit and loss, that they have to work around, right? And therefore, if there are certain worries there, certain anxieties, certain targets that the people in positions of leadership are looking at, the idea is, can I, as a junior, provide value? Can I think about all sorts of win-win conditions that we could potentially tap on? So one very real example of us getting access to work is, why don't we work for free for a while for this particular reason? Let's say, for example, I am out of a job for the last 6 months. No one wants to take me in. But who would push back from free labor? Very, very few, right? Free labor is always something valuable, right? You want to increase productivity, you want to increase yield, and free labor is the best opportunity that people could potentially tap on. But then with free labor comes with knowledge. You learn the craft for free, right? You trade it with your time, sure. But as a junior, I mean, you don't need that much money, right? But what you are building to yourself in your arsenal of negotiation benefits is that if the company were to lose you, what would it cost the company? It's a non-zero value now because they'd rather keep you than to hire somebody from outside with zero domain knowledge, right? And so now you can move from doing free internships into potentially having the company pay the amount of salary that it feels that it could afford to keep you, and you can go up from there, right? So there are all these opportunities to negotiate win-wins. That's one of it, right? Another option is that um, when you're young, you don't have a lot of responsibilities in life. Why not try a bit of entrepreneurship? Try things out. You know, you have all the vigor, you have all the stamina that people of my age don't have anymore. You know, try to take those risks. One of the things that Singapore may not be that strong as other countries is that we are a bit too defensive as a nation. We are too defensive as people. We don't take that much risk, and so there are a lot of opportunities out there that, you know, in the current market conditions, it might um, actually offer us um, certain means to achieve certain goals that we have seen people in the past. You know, things like creative, for example, how Razer succeeded in Singapore and overseas, how Pat Snap, for example, succeeded in Singapore and overseas, and many other companies that are born and bred in Singapore that actually scaled. There's that packet of work that we can look into today that we never really had for some time. So yeah, I think as a junior, you know, you have all these opportunities available for you. It's just about being creative and trying things out for yourself, and you won't always succeed, right? Like there's a fair chance that we might things that might not work, you know. But life is long, right? It's always a mix of success and failures, and it's really about how we respond to success, how we respond to failures, and make the best of both.
What juniors have the most is time,
That's right.
where the seniors doesn't have.
That's right.
So they can try out a lot of new things. To share one of my own stories is that, Julius, when I started off, like during my university days, one thing that I was doing is I was trying to get into certain internships, because since I didn't have like certain experiences, I always will get rejected. So then what I started to do is that I started sort of volunteering, which is like free work, right, for some of these companies. What with One thing was like I was very passionate about what I was doing. I It gave me a lot of opportunity for me to learn, and then also it created my network. To be honest, if I share the first corporate job I landed, because I was speaking in front of like 1,000 people audience, and the hiring manager was in the audience, and he was like, "Okay, we should hire that guy." So it opened up a lot of doors, and I had a lot of time as well, during when I was like very young, too. So I think this works. Then being feared about how things gonna go. I know there's a lot of pressure. One thing is, if you're coming from a middle income or maybe low income family background, it adds in a certain pressure as well on you. But I think no point in worrying. You should try. I think the way forward is you have to do something. I want to ask one last question from you, which is around, you've been a very good mentor to the folks that you have directly worked with, And then you have also been proactively been mentoring folks as well to get them like successful in their career, getting people to think through from first principle mindset. So when you look at from a from as a mentor's point of view, right, in this current day and age, right, how would you prepare a future engineer? Do you want them to be more of a coder? Do you want them to be more of an architect? How would you mentor that future engineer to become successful in probably next 5 to 10 years time?
Oh, that's a very complex question. I don't think there's one good answer because every person is different. So, what I think is that the best way for people to quote unquote succeed is for them to be who they are and take advantage of where they're strong at. Some engineers are not designed to be an IC for a prolonged duration. Some are, and some are more entrepreneurial in the way they think. Some would actually leave IT and do something else. So there's all these gradient, right? And so as a result, I think despite all the different nuances that people might consider in their life and the different trade-offs that they might think about, there are always principles for us to think, for us to consider, right? And I think the most important principle that um, every person that I think I mentor, that I think they should inculcate, including myself, I think, is to always think about win-win. Think about the first principles. Why are we doing what we are doing? It's very important to always use principles as a baseline, as a foundation by which we make decisions because we are emotional creatures. We will always ask, we will always act on the visceral instincts. And it's always essential to avoid those kind of things because that's when we regret stuff, right? We say things that we don't mean to say. We hurt people's feelings. We hurt our own feelings. And now with certain ego, certain pride, we so um, in light of that, therefore, when I mentor people, it always has to be catered to what they need at a point in time. Um, some people they need to be told off that they're wrong, and sometimes it has to be a bit more harsh than others. Some people they just had to be handheld for a while, in NEA, for example, I am working with one engineer who, maybe I should say a bit of a background of how NEA works. As we all know, in the government, we don't have a lot of software engineers. How our technology projects work today is we have a lot of project managers, and they work with companies like Accenture, NCS as the engineering, and they're the ones who build the software for us. They're the ones who maintain the software for us, and as a result, there's a significant gap in terms of our sophistication in how the different software works within the government, and so there's a need for us to transition, right? There's a need for us to have a better sense of how our software works so that when we make certain decisions, it's something that is good for our citizens, good for our partners, good for the government. So we started hiring. So right now in NEA, given the size of the organization, there are very, very few software engineers. And so the amount of systems that we have to take a look at in comparison to the engineers that could actually do the work is not the best at this time. And so my other colleague who's um, in the middle of his career, probably a 4 or 5 year software engineer, there's a bit of struggle because the responsibilities are much higher than what um, I guess his experience could account for at that point in time. And so there's a bit more hand holding that's needed, a bit more encouragement that's needed. The good thing is he thinks in the right direction. And he always said that I think much faster than him. But after he takes a step back or two and consider what I said, it made sense. And it's good in a way, not to me, but to him because he could see what good looks like at that point in his career. And sometime later, he could, and I believe he would be much better than me in many, many ways. And therefore, at that point in time, I could learn so much more from him, and people could learn so much more from him. And so I think in mentoring, it's very important to custom fit how you mentor people into something that they need at a point in their lives. The communication has to be custom fit for them as well. And I think more importantly, it's important for me to care about the person as deeply as I could, because if I do it as a chore, as a job, I may not give the level of dedication that I give as compared to looking at the person and seeing him or her as somebody who's precious, who can multiply the impact of mentorship to the people that he or she will interact with now and later. And so I kind of see it that way. And I think in light of that, again, it's a win-win. It makes me happy. I can feel the impact that I'm providing him or her, and it scales, right? It multiplies.
Thanks, Julius, for joining for today's video. Before we let you go, any recommended readings that you recommend for the viewers or engineers should read?
There's certainly a lot, but I think one of the things that I feel engineers should really take a look at is the book written by the founder of Netscape. Um, um, so, it's called The Hard Things About Hard Things. And what the book pretty much talks about um, is how Netscape started, what are the difficult decisions CEOs have to make. And because the CEO is a software engineer himself, it gives you a perspective of how things look like outside of software engineering, because things are connected. You have the corporate function, you have the business function, you have product management, you have engineering, you have customer support, you have operations, and you have your customers. And all of these things are tied together. So it's very important for engineers not to look at things in silo. And Hard Things About Hard Things helps you look at the whole spectrum, and therefore, in having knowledge of the different verticals, it allows you as a software engineer to consider certain engineering decisions in light of the bigger picture.
Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Chef Raz. Thank you so much.